Our next speaker is Amy Dreves, speaking on her favorite topic, or the one that we've come to rely on here for, SWD.
I was just thinking how cool RNAi is, and I know at the national meetings it was just a huge topic, conversation, a lot of really good talks, because it's still not well understood, but I think you're going to have to rely on some of the tools that I'm going to tell you today, because I think there's a lot more to be learned in the RNAi, but I think it has a very potential there. I would like to just, before I begin, and just, there's so many thanks, not only in those that have contributed to the understanding of spotted wing over the last 5 years, but the many, many collaborators, including those that are in the room. And every time we have a discussion, I learn something new. So thank you. So I'm going to talk about spotted wing Drosophila in case you forgot about it over the winter. But I do want to also just make known that there are other invasives standing out there ready to become #1. And as you'll see there in the bottom right-hand corner, the brown marmorated stink bug. In the last 2 years, I've really seen that grow. And so it has become, just get on the website and see what's happening on the east side and be very aware, be able to recognize. There's a lot of good information out there in identification. And then there's, I call them the race, you can see these racing stripes on this fly, another Drosophila, that now is in the United States. And on the east side, we see thousands and thousands of flies, and we have not seen it at all in Oregon. Thank goodness. However, it is not nearly as destructive. It has a weaker ovipositor. It comes in a little bit later in the ripeness, before, like, you know, the melanogaster, the one that loves rotting fruit. They all have their kind of niches, and to me, still, spotted wing takes the cake. I'm going to talk about a lot of research highlights. Holy moly. And here we go. Everyone asks me what's going to happen this year. It is absolutely beautiful out there. Okay? 2011, 12, 12, 13, remember what happened in 2013 and 2014? We had major freezes. Not only below freezing weather, but we had a duration of freezes that started in December, came into January, February, and I'd like to hear from you. There was a major delay of what I saw in infestation, up to 3 weeks in many places. Did you see that? So there was this buildup, and sometimes it takes 2 generations, at least 2 or 3 generations before you see that infestation. Right now, we're 19 days ahead of 2014, 27 days ahead of 2013, and you can see 40 days ahead of the 30-year average as far as temperature in degrees out in the field. So you can see here, February 17th, this picture was taken. It's beautiful out there. I have traps. A lot of flies. There's a lot of flies in the field right now. Again, why? They're not laying eggs. Their bodies are hollow, and they're feeding. Every time they wake up, they're feeding, okay? Pollen, nectar, extra floral nectaries of some of your trees that are starting to bud. Look at the bottom, there's a little bit of those nectaries. So what do I think is going to happen? 2 ideas. I got to, sorry. 2, they're going to explode. They were pretty high numbers at the end of the season. Okay? So they could explode and we could have a big problem. And then I started thinking, maybe they'll die out. Maybe they're waking up so much and they're feeding so much, they're going to run out of energy. Because the fruit won't be ready by then. Let's hope for energy. Where are they? again, over 3 years, we did vacuuming, we sifted debris and leaf litter underneath plants that were heavily infested with SWD by the end of the season, and no sanitation took place. Tree collars, these corrugated tree collars we put around, thinking, okay, they're going to find refuge. They need to be warm, they need to be protected. 3 years, where are they? We only found 28 adults in that whole 3 years in the winter. Okay, and no other life stages. We still believe it's adults only until you prove me wrong. Adults, to me, are the life stage that's surviving. We find at end of season, October, November, they will be dropping, the pupae will be dropping out of fruit, but all those sifted soil, we found all those pupal cases were empty. Okay? We found a lot of those 28. Inside, those are walnuts. Near the persimmons that were falling down, near those rotting apples. They're not laying eggs, they're feeding. Okay, that's their behavior. Feed built up, they have fat bodies that line the inside of their abdomens. And the coolest part is those organs that were in their bodies start disassembling. And their bodies are hollow, there's all these cells. And they're turning into fat bodies and proteins so they survive. I think it's really cool. Try to dissect a female abdomen. So again, these foods are supplying a lot of food. These fruits are supplying. And again, we found within barks and crevices, only 28. It's not very many, but you tried. If I released 5,000 flies in here, I would bet you couldn't find them. So there's a lot of things besides weather that affect fly pressure. Not only that weather, but your landscape surroundings. That habitat provides perfection in food. And I'm going to talk a little bit too on the presence of non-crop plants on the next slide. But I brought this in just to remind you about the life cycle and that it takes temperature drives the development of spotted wing. And I put this in now because I'm going to talk about this 169 degree days it requires to get from an egg to adult. And they start developing right around that 10°C, that 50 degrees temperature where they start. The eggs will develop. It takes about 9 degree days. Don't try to understand this too much other than each life stage requires a certain amount of temperature for development. So if we were to look at a factor that affects fly pressure, we produced a paper, and you're going to see it out there in the Annals of Entomology Society of America, and an OSU extension bulletin is coming out in March. So you'll see that with the list of those plants that have supported spotted wing Drosophila, and they are put in, there's going to be like a warehouse on IPPC that includes, as we learn more plants and fruits that actually are laid upon by spotted wing, that will be in the IPPC website at OSU. But I want to just point out, let me see if I can figure this out. Oh yeah. I'm going to talk a little bit about Sarcococca because, again, that was the #1 host for me that had up to 90% infestation. And I've been checking them every week while I'm writing papers and looking for, is there any oviposition? Nothing has occurred. Okay, nothing has occurred where they're producing fall-bearing fruits that overwinter, and now there's fruits and flowers, but on all those fall-bearing fruits, nothing has occurred. So then I started looking closely at the last years, and my first egg laying, and I say that because it's only 5 years in, but we worked very hard to bring in fruits. They occurred on non-crop fruits, horticultural wildland fruits. First for me, Sarcococca. And then not only May 9th was the first I saw damage, then April 22nd in 2012, and April 1st, did we get any fruit in 2014? No. The freeze knocked all the flowers off. Even more of a delay for spotted wing. And so if we add all those together, I predicted about April 20th. But if we keep going at the rate we do with warm temperatures, it could be as early as March 30th. I'm watching the degree day model and confirming it and verifying it with fruit in the field. So the other thing I learned this year is I have traps out there. I'm going to have another slide that says, that asks the question, do you think monitoring is important? I definitely think it's important, and I'll tell you more as we go. We found them, the first increase where you get 0, 1, 5, and then all of a sudden you get this major increase, okay? That major increase didn't occur when the fruit was red, it was when they were green. They were feeding, their bodies need food for egg production, okay? So this is what is building a model that I would like to have a workshop to teach you how it works, how a degree day model. So you can pay close attention to the degree day model at OSU. You can see here, when you see red, that's female numbers. When you see blue, it's male numbers. And if you remember, the females are more robust, and survival is much higher in the females through the winter. Okay, 78% come out as females. So I thought, okay, let's not only look at increases when they happened in these different crops, but let's look at when the sex starts changing. Meaning there was probably a first generation, and then you're getting more males. And so here we go. I means an increase. It happened at 115 degree days. All this is going to be on the model and written out for you. So there's these increases. It started out very low in March. And then we got this increase from here to here. Notice there are more females than males, okay? And then I found my first damage, only 4 or 5%. It took a lot to do that through years. And then I got a sex change. Notice, I didn't really, but sorry. I just wanted to make sure that they didn't get out of this room. You can see more blue, more males. The shift happened. And we see that continually in cherries through all 4 years. And so I would predict that the first egg laying, that's just by subtracting, knowing what your degree days are for each stage, subtracting. And about May 15th, I predict egg laying to occur in cherries. So I take non-crops I talked about, and then the cherries in the Pacific Northwest are the next ones that get hit. Oh, let's talk about caneberries. So I pulled up some data. May. What's going on in May? Cherries. What's going on before that? The non-crop fruits. And then we have low, and all of a sudden I get my increase. And if I keep adding egg to adults, I see that, I see another generation, I see another generation. Notice we're getting into the fall. When photo period starts changing, fruit starts disappearing and we get major numbers of flies out in the field, mating and feeding, getting ready for winter. I look inside their bodies, November, December, October, no eggs anymore. It's just what happens with the fly. Very interesting that some of these pieces here. Let's go. And then there's blueberries. They kind of cross over with raspberries, and I'm going to just show you this quickly. We saw the trap increases. Notice very low, always low, that how good it is to look historically at what your numbers have been. And then we found first detection. If I do a backtrack in math, About July 9th is when we get our first oviposition, and I swear everybody tells me right around mid-July is when you first get your first hit. However, weather can affect that. Only 6 days between increases in traps. Why don't we care about monitoring? We should. Many, many reasons for monitoring. So if you're going to monitor, what is the latest and greatest out there? And so Suzuki trap bait is still having EPA problems. It had, I talked to them last week. They're from Spain. There's some in a warehouse in Nebraska. EPA's not allowing them to get it to Great Lakes, IPM, etc. Chinese vinegar is too dark for me, although there's some great stuff with Chinese vinegar. 50% is as good as 100%. Baker's yeast, awesome, has always proved to be very good, but it stinks. And who wants to be mixing it all the time? Let's talk about these new lures that are out on the company, that the 2 companies are now producing. 2 lures that are long-lasting up to at least 4 weeks. That's work that they're thinking even 6 weeks, depending on the environment. There's one that's a pouch, and there's these dual lures, and some of that has changed, but they're going to have them out by May to June in a lot of the Pacific Northwest, long-lasting. And there's several people on the East Coast. Again, it's just these mixes of apple cider, red wine, sugar, flour sugar yeast. You can see the combination. They have this little floating boat in there on top of, anyway. It's, I think it's very nice, but I think it'd be nice to have it commercialized and make it easy. It's better for a backyard person. So let's, Tracy was tested in 2013 as a dual lure from a guy, Cha, in Landolt, Washington, USDA, did some great stuff, great papers, and they took that and commercialized it into these tiny little, you can barely see that. Let's back up here. But basically the bottom line is this, Sentry, every time you see a star, Sentry by far had higher numbers, significantly better than the Tracy. And Tracy had 1.4 to 10.7 times more SWD. Okay, it's a great one. I actually brought them to show you what they look like, and you attach it to a lid. All right, and I put water as my drowning solution. I want to see what's in it. And I put a little boric acid, some people use antifreeze, but you want preservatives, so I just put some boric acid in there, because I check them every 3-4 days to a week at a time. Both lures, though, were male dominant, okay? And the Tracy had 12 to 50% more females, in which that's what we want, but much less of them. So that I would consider them more specific to the female, and the female's the one that lays eggs. And they are doing some incredible work right now. They felt like their pouches, after I went through my data, didn't have a good release. Those little dual lures compared to the pouch, and had the slow release, bringing in a lot higher numbers. So they have actually version 2 coming out. And then we say with trap designs, I brought every single trap design that I feel has potential. We haven't found that bullet trap design. It's really dependent too a lot on placement, how many you have out there, etc. So let's go on. And when we put in these traps, and now this one here is what ODA uses. This one here is a brand new one you can buy that I think is great, and it basically is the prototype of what I did in 2010 and never got money for it. And so when we put these, we put some insecticide strips. If you remember, I talked about it. There's one from Amvac, there's one from Haircon, there's a no-pest strip. We increased efficacy in all our traps. But I'm interested in more in a trap that does not have escapage, okay? And when I say monitoring, it's not just for adults. There are 2 documents that put out all on assessing if your fruit has larvae in it. Very, very important. Know what's going on out in the field and know possibly mapping where it's happening. Oh, it's by the landscape that has dogwood or the elderberry, or it's close to a very shaded or the riparian area. So I just wanted to make sure, oops, sorry. If you go to uspest.org/SWD, you'll find 25 of my documents on that site. Okay, and as I get new stuff, I'm just going to keep putting it on. So try uspest.org, including the degree day model. We did a mass trapping. I talk about it. More traps. Can you minimize damage? We actually found that when they come to some of those traps, that holes at 10 to 30% never enter. Well, let's put some kind of a spray solution with a sugar tractant on it in hopes that you can kill some of those. We did all kinds of work. That's boric acid and sugar. And basically the bottom line, we measured damage. We found no difference. Why? We didn't have flies to the very end of the season. There was no difference in areas that were trapped versus untrapped. It's a lot of work. I feel, though, I would never have chose mid-season to do mass trapping. We combined with a regional study on the East Coast. They wanted a mid-season variety blueberry. I would choose areas of green where I got that circle that's cherries. Possibly you could use Himalayan blackberries. Has it been tested if mass trapping works? Not in the Pacific Northwest, but there's over 200 papers, and in some of those papers, yes, it's a great thing to do, and they had positive results. It's something we're still trying to understand. Wade could tell you in China, too, they feel that mass trapping, to try to pull in flies and remove them from the system, is the way to go. This is a very interesting piece. The chemicals, Joe's going to talk about them, but this is what I want to talk about. What about reduced spray strategies? What about adding an oil to bicanic? How about adding sugar to chemicals? Jimmy Cliff did work with Way and Denny and Everett. It was favored, this idea of spraying a border or every other row in low pressure seasons. To me, it still needs to be tested. When you get high numbers that come on early, will it work? I think it's worth looking at. But organic, here's a good one. The company said, okay, it's not working. It's at least not giving us what we want. And here you have, if you add this oil to it, you see this great increase in efficacy. The company's now looking at it. And then there's a paper out by Cole saying, add sugar. And it's all these folks, south, north, are adding sugar to their chemicals, increasing performance and efficacy. I raised my hand at the last meeting. Will bees like it too? I talked to experts. They can detect sugar at very low concentrations. They can take a granulated sugar, add a little saliva or the dew in the morning, and they will feed on it, and particularly at times when they are low in food resources. There's a lot of natural enemies out there, but they too are just building. They did foreign exploration of parasitoids. I'm now about ready to run out of time. And those parasitoids are down in Davis doing work on making sure they're specific to spotted wing. There's leftover hanging fruit. I want you to pay attention to it this season. There's no doubt in my mind that they become a breeding site. How are we going to take care of that? You got to train your workers. You got to get the droids out there. Just kidding. You gotta pick often and you gotta sort out. Teach your people how to sort out soft fruit. That's what the East Coast is promoting. 2 of my growers felt it's one of the #1 things for them for reducing and minimizing SWD.
Amy, I just remarked, but that, for fresh market, I kind of agree with you, but for the commercial machine harvesting, this would
It's
not.
not, yeah, true. And again, we also believe, we talked about this last time, that 3 days at 35, you can reduce the development, and if they're by 3 days, and if you have eggs in there, you can kill them for raspberries. But most of all, if you have a large larvae in there, they'll come to the top, and you'll certainly know that you have SWD before you bring it to market. East Coast are using netting. I think this is crazy, but in some cases, maybe it works for small folks. I can't imagine it on a large scale. And some are vacuuming up flies in the cane beers and disposing those fruits and spreading them out on roads. Interesting. Keep the dust down. So, Imagine Sound Solutions. I will be doing a flow chart. It'll be with each one of these. We'll have a detail of my studies and how I went about it. And there are a lot in the toolbox, and to really make yourself a plan. And if you do more than spraying or watch the flight and say, okay, I can reduce to, that's an improvement. That's it. Thanks.